Okay, welcome everyone to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Chullin. Today is our 6th class of this Masechet, and we are going to be reviewing Daf 34 through 40. So last time we mentioned that we had a Mishnah that said that if no blood came out of when they did shechita. So then, when the person's hands touch the animal, it does not make it impure. And today we're going to talk a lot about impurity and purity. So maybe I'll just share. Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I still have, let me see. I used to have I can't see it right now. Okay. I used to, wait. Okay, okay, I don't see it right now, but let's discuss what impurity and purity has to do with this. So I think we mentioned it last time that something that is food or produce, it needs to become in contact with a liquid, which then makes it susceptible to impurity, to tum'ah. So we were asking last time, what is the case of our Mishnah? So we said maybe our case of our Mishnah is speaking about meat that is treated like sacrificial meat, right? What's called kudshim. And it's not sanctified, but it's being treated as if it was sanctified, maybe because Kohanim are eating it and they want to be extra careful. So the Gemara says that we're speaking about meat, therefore it can't be that we're talking about Chullin that is, something mundane that's treated like truma, right? That would not be the case. Rather, it would have to be like sacrificial meat, like kudshim. Now, we say that one who eats this thing, it's more stringent than food, right? Why? Because we're going to say, if you eat, now let's just remind ourselves how impurity, how tum'ah works, right? Basically, what we have is different levels of impurity. Therefore, if a person is what's called a rishon, like we'll call it first degree of impurity. So then what they pass on would then become a sheni, right? Second degree. Now, if you eat, so the Gemara tells us that if you eat a rishon, right, something that has first degree impurity, then it becomes first, right? It becomes a first degree. Or no, if you eat a first degree rishon, it becomes a sheni, right? Because again, the food is more stringent than the person, right? That would be the distinction. And the difference is that a person and food have different shiurim, different measurements that would affect impurity. The Gemara says, well, we don't necessarily learn impurity, tum'ah, from the shear, from the measurement or the amount. We do learn from different levels of impurity, as we said, rishon, sheni, right? First degree, second degree. Now, we know that a sheni, a second degree, can make something else a sheni, right? So if an impurity that touches food that is wet, so then the liquid, again, if the original thing is again, if it's a sheni, but the liquid then becomes a rishon, first degree, and then the food becomes a sheni, right? Everything gets bumped down a level. Let's say a person eats a shlishi, right? A third degree. So which is with truma. So the person becomes a sheni. It goes actually up. And this is unique only with truma. With also, this is also the case if we're talking about regular meat, right, chulin, but it's treated like it's a sacrifice, right? It's called chulin, that's treated like kodesh. It would be the same case. If you eat a shlishi of this chulin, right? Again, this mundane thing, but it's being treated like it's truma. So then the person becomes a shlishi. Okay, so it maintains the same level. Now, again, so then the Gemara explains again, a rishon, right, first degree of chulin, of meat that's mundane, if it is, right, it is impure, and it can transmit the impurity, right? In Hebrew, we say it is tameh u'metameh, right? It transmits the impurity. A sheni, a second degree, is impure, it's tameh, but we say it's pasul, meaning it doesn't transmit beyond being a secondary tum'ah, a sheni. That's with chulin. But a shlishi, this is it could be eaten with truma spices because they won't eat, again, now in general, a truma would be affected by this shlishi, but if we're talking about spices, there's not going to be the amount, the measurement, the shi'ur of these spices right, there's not going to be enough of it in the food, and therefore it would not be a problem. Now, again, if you eat truma that is a shlishi, that's third degree of impurity, then the person is tameh, right? He's tameh. He cannot now go eat truma, but the person can touch the truma. Right, so we see here a difference between touching and eating. If a person ate chulin, again, mundane meat, that was a shlishi, that was third degree, but it was being treated like sacrificial meat, right, kudshim. So then he could eat kudshim after that, because nothing can make a revi'i, a fourth degree, except for actual sacrificial meat. But since this is not the case, so then the person would be able to eat the meat. If the person ate a shlishi, then the person becomes a sheni, a second degree, for sacrificial meat, but not for truma. Right, and again, here we're talking about what's the shlishi, what's the third degree. We're speaking about chulin, regular meat, but that was being treated like truma. Because they were only careful for the truma, but they weren't careful for kudshim, for sacrificial meat. Okay, and then the Breita brings the Gemara brings a Breita that speaks about what's called Tumat Midras. Tumat Midras is a higher level of impurity that is generally for a person who is a zav or a zava or a nida, right? Someone who had a bodily emission that made them impure. And basically what they're saying is that different groups become relative to one another, meaning the clothing of an Am Haaretz, a person who is not so careful with impurity, is considered impure for someone who is careful about impurity. And the same thing, the clothing of someone who's careful about tum'ah, but is a regular Yisrael, versus a Kohen, right? A Kohen is a priest or a family of priests are going to be much more careful with their clothing, and therefore you can't compare one group to another, right? And here it continues and says that things that are worn by people who are careful about truma are not necessarily careful about sacrificial meat, right? Kudshim, right? Because these are different levels, each level underneath is right below them is not necessarily as stringent or careful than the group that is above them, right? So we see that there is a difference. The Gemara says, well, maybe this is different, right? Maybe we're talking about, if you're talking about midras, where someone maybe sat on it, so that could be different because maybe a person's wife sat on it when they weren't looking, but with produce, in general, we would say that if you're careful about impurity for truma, you're also careful about kachim, meaning careful is careful. And then the Gemara says, no, that's not necessarily the case. What about an Am Haaretz, again, someone who is not careful about halakha, about Jewish law? They are generally trusted about Kudshim, again, as we said, as we said, people are very careful when it comes to sacrifices, right? We did that in Masachet Zvachim and in Menachot. People are very careful when it comes to sacrifices to make sure that they do not become impure. So if an Am Haaretz says that something is pure, right? When we're talking about kudshim, we believe them, but not truma, right? Because again, we're saying it's two different levels of being careful, unless it's wine making season, and then they are trusted. If a person says that there is kudshim, right, something that is sanctified in this barrel, we believe the person, even if there's also truma in the barrel. We aren't concerned that they are touching, and maybe the truma is actually impure. We basically believe them for all of these things. Okay, back to our different levels of impurity. A sheni, again, second degree impurity for chulin, for regular meat. So then it can make liquids a rishon. Liquid always goes up a level instead of going down a level. And then it will make truma impure. A shlishi, again, a chulin that is third degree of impurity, and then if it touches sanctified liquids, things that are sanctified, kodesh, then those become a rishon, and then the solids, right, are like solids, chulin, are treated like kodesh. Again, could invalidate sacrificial or sanctified things. Or maybe it's just like regular chulin, or it's like truma. It's actually a machluket. Okay, back to our Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon said, even if it didn't bleed, the animal didn't bleed, the meat is susceptible to impurity. Now, why? Because he holds that the thing that makes the meat susceptible to impurity is actually the shechita and not the blood. Or another opinion is it's also shechita, but also the blood. Now, the blood from a dead animal does not make food or meat susceptible to impurity. And the Gemara says, if that's the case, so therefore blood from shechita does make it susceptible. So the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. If you killed an animal, the blood is machshir. It does make the food susceptible to impurity. But if it died by itself, then it would not make the animal susceptible to impurity. Blood from the wound of an animal, again, does not make the animal susceptible to tum'ah. But again, if you killed it, then it does. Okay, and this is learned from a verse that blood is like a beverage. Therefore, on the Daf 36, right, blood from an invalid sacrifice, what's called psulei mukdashim. So the blood from that is permitted to get benefit from, because again, that animal is now invalid to be a sacrifice. If you, let's say, bloodlet an animal, so when it first comes out, it does not make the animal susceptible to impurity. It is not seen as a beverage, as a liquid. Okay, let's say you're slaughtering an animal and the blood sprays on a pumpkin or a squash. So then it would be that squash is now susceptible to impurity. Or maybe it's the Gemara says it's suspended. So we have to see what that means. So if it was on the whole time, so let's say if the blood was on this squash the whole time, if you wiped it off, if it was on the whole time of shechita, then it would make it susceptible. But if you wipe the blood off in between the two simanim, again, remember, we have two simanim, two pipes that need to be severed for shechita to be valid. Now, we can construct a case where you cut one of the simanim, you wipe off the blood, and then you cut the other one. So it's a machloket if the blood needs to be on this, on this squash the whole time, or just at the beginning, right? And then this is based on the discussion, what is shechita, right? Is it from the beginning of the process till the end? Therefore, if this blood was there at the beginning, it is the blood of shechita. Or do we say, no, shechita is only at the end, and therefore the blood that came in the beginning is just blood from a wound and not from shechita? Okay, those are the two options. Okay. Now, we said another option is tolin. We suspend it. What does that mean, suspend it? We have to wait till the end of shechita. If the blood is still there, so then it becomes susceptible to tumah. And if it's not, then it is not. Or maybe suspended means we have to wait till Eliyahu, and because there's a doubt, we can't eat it, but we also can't burn it because we don't know what the status of this thing is. Or they both agree that you can't burn it, or maybe that you can burn it. So we're not sure what that means. Okay. Let's say you have, this is a flashback to Menachot. Let's say you have a dry piece of mincha, right, that didn't have any oil on it. It is not susceptible to tuma because it is still dry. But because it is Kodshim, it is something that is sanctified. It is beloved, and that's called chibat Kodshim, right? Because it's beloved, therefore it is susceptible to tum'ah, and it could become a rishon or a sheni, right? First degree or second degree, or no, it can become impure, but it can't transmit that impurity. Again, because because there's no liquid, it cannot be it cannot become tameh. Or again, because of this chibat hakodesh, because there is this belovedness of sanctified things, it's as if it was touched by liquid, and it can now transmit the impurity. Okay, right, there's two verses, one for impurity from a dead body, and one for impurity from a creature, from a sheret. And both are needed for this. Okay, we say that shechita makes the meat susceptible to impurity, as if it was, right, touched by liquid, but that is only derabanan. That's only rabbinic in nature. So now the Gemara gives another case, right? Let's say you pick grapes for pressing, and right, to make wine, and juice comes out of these grapes. So then that liquid now makes the grape susceptible to impurity. Or we say no, right? So that's Beit Shammai. Or no, Hillel says that it would not, but he doesn't want this, right? But because he doesn't want this juice right now, therefore it's only rabbinic and not deoraita, not from the Torah. Okay, now we say that the blood of a sanctified animal, right, dam kodshim, is not machshir. It does not make the meat susceptible to impurity because it cannot be spilled, right? Only a liquid that could be spilled on the floor would make the animal susceptible, again, the meat susceptible to impurity. Let's say, right, so then the Gemara talks about the water that was in the butchering place in the temple. That is not machshir, that does not make the meat susceptible to impurity. Now, right, also, let's say you had a cow that was going to be a shlamim, right? It's going to be a peace offering, and you walked the cow through a river, and then it got wet, and then you slaughter the animal. So the water that's on the animal can now make this animal susceptible to impurity. That is only because it is sanctified, and that makes the sanctified meat susceptible to impurity deoraita from the Torah. And therefore, if it does become impure, you actually do burn it. But can it make other things impure? Now the Gemara says, teku. Okay, next Mishnah on Daf 37. If you shecht an animal that is about to die, okay, it is not a shrifa. Let's just remember the words. Shrifa means an animal that has a mortal wound. In the next chapter, we're going to say what all of these things are, but something that a limb or an organ is broken, is damaged, that is a trefa. But let's say we have an animal that is sick and it's about to die, so it's not a trefa. If you shecht it, so now, if it jerks, right? The word in Hebrew is pirkus. If it like convulses, so then it shows that it was actually alive before shechita, and then you can even actually eat this animal. Or you actually need the blood to spurt out when you shecht it. When we're talking about the jerking, it has to be 2 limbs. Let's say you shecht at night, and then in the morning, right, and it was dark and you didn't see, and then in the morning you see there's blood on the walls because it sprayed out, then the animal is valid, the shechita is valid, and you can eat the animal. Or maybe you only need it to jerk 1 limb. If we're talking about this convulsing, maybe it's 1 limb, maybe it's the tail. This is the same for sheep, goats, cows. If it just straightens its limb, that doesn't count. It needs to bring it back. And all of this is for an animal that is going to die, right? What's called misukenet, from the word sakana, in danger, right? Again, not a trefa, and we'll get into all these words. So now the Gemara asks, right, can you eat this animal? We talked about shechita being valid, but does that mean you can actually eat the misukenet, this animal? So the verse says it needs to be a living animal when you shecht the animal. So maybe that means not an animal that's going to die. But the verse says no. The verse is talking about a trefa, again, this animal that's going to die, which is asur, but not the misukenet, right? Again, trefa, there's something wrong with organs or limbs. Misukenet, it's just dying, like for, I don't know, old age or something else. Again, trefa is mortally wounded. Misukenet is sick and dying. There's nothing wrong with the actual limbs. Maybe trefa, misukenet, and nevela are all the same. We say no. They are all different, and right, the Gemara brings different things, right? The Yechezkel says, I've never eaten nevela and trefa or pigul, and the Gemara says, well, obviously you didn't. You're not supposed to eat any of those things. So it says really he meant a misukenet, meaning normally you can eat a misukenet, but I am holy and I didn't even eat this misukenet. Another explanation is the misukenet is an animal that cannot stand up by itself. It keeps falling down, or maybe it means even if it can still eat something because it can't stand up, we see it as dying. Daf 38, Rav says that this misukenet is an animal that's making this low, mooing sound, or it just defecates, or it moves its ear. Anything that it does that isn't done when it's dead, like rigor mortis, if anything that is showing that it's alive, would make it misukenet. If it just moves the limb in one direction, we say that's just like a spasm. If it moves it in 2, then it would be enough. If it does this low mooing sound, we say that hold on one second. It depends what type of voice it's saying, right? If it is a strong voice, so then it's okay. It means it's alive. If it's a low voice, it means it's actually like dead or actually dying. Same thing with defecation. Depends what type, how it's defecating. Like, is it dead or is it dying? Again, firkus, the spasm, it has to be at the end of shechita. So that means it doesn't really mean at the end, it means in the middle, but not at the beginning, or maybe it actually means at the end, right? We have to see that it was alive till the end of shechita, right? What about this blood spurting out? It can even happen at the beginning. Actually, it's a stronger siman, it's a stronger sign than the spasm. But the Mishnah implies that maybe it's not the strongest sign that the animal is alive. Okay. Okay, if we're talking about from the flock, right? So sheep or goats, the front leg needs these two movements. The back leg only needs one. For cattle, it's both legs, and any movement would be valid. For a bird, even if it just shakes its wing, that would be valid as well. Okay, next Mishnah. If a Jew shechts for an animal, for a non-Jew, that would be valid because the Jew is doing the slaughtering, or maybe it is invalid. Even if the non-Jew retains some ownership of, like, even a small part of the animal, it would be invalid because the Gemara assumes that the stam intention, the regular intention, or like the normal regular intent of a non-Jew is for idolatry, which we'll see is not everyone agrees with. Or maybe we learn a kal v'chomer, right? We learn this from kadshim, from sacrifices, where the intent of the kohen affects the animal, right? We did this in zvachim for a long time, and in menachot. It's the person who's doing the action whose intent matters. Therefore, Chullin should also go according to the shochet, meaning the Jew, and not the owner. And therefore, it should be valid. So now the Gemara says, right, again, can an owner of the sacrifice affect pigul? Remember, pigul was improper intent for a sacrifice. So we say, right, if you hear the non-Jewish owner say it's for an idol, then obviously everyone agrees it's invalid. But if we didn't hear him say anything, maybe it would be valid. Or it's always his intent. He's always thinking about idolatry. Or maybe the opposite. Even if he says it, it's still valid because we go according to the person who is shechting, meaning the Jew, and not the owner, right? So again, that's the question. What do we go according to? Okay, dot 39. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Dot 39. If the Jew shechts the animal with intent to eat it, but to throw, right, again, the Jew is just shechting the animal. He wants to eat the meat, but he also has intent to to sprinkle the blood for idolatry, or burn the fats for idolatry. The animal is invalid, or maybe it is valid. Why? Here we're going to say, can intent during one service, one action, but having intent about another action, right? Can that affect the animal? Again, right? We are slaughtering the animal to eat the meat, but I'm going to take the blood and use it for idolatry. Now, when you're slaughtering the animal, that has nothing to do with the sprinkling of the blood. So can my intent during this action about another action, does that mess the animal up? So again, that is the machloket. And there is a similar machloket when dealing with sacrifices, right? In terms of pigul, in terms of different intent. So the Mishnah said that intent does not invalidate the chulin, regular animals, but it does for idolatry, right? Therefore it means that intent during one action about another service does not invalidate the animal. And you only look at shechita, intent during shechita, right? So if you're shechting the animal for idolatry, right? So you're actually slaughtering it in mind for that this animal is for idolatry, that is problematic. But thinking about the next service while you're still doing the service before would not be an invalidating factor. Okay, let's say, again, we know that there are 4 main avodot, right? 4 main services, and intent is important. But with chulin, there's only, right, 2 avodot that count, and only the shochet's intent, right? Not the owner. If you shecht it with proper intent, and then afterwards you throw the blood for idolatry. So this actually was a case that happened in Caesarea. They didn't permit the animal, but they also didn't prohibit it. So what does that mean? We say, right, with the Jew, maybe it's the end, right? Again, the intent happened after shechita. Maybe we say, oh, the intent after shechita proves what they were thinking about at the beginning, and therefore it's invalid. Or no, when you actually did the first, right, action, meaning shechita, you had proper intent. Therefore, this animal is totally valid. So now we bring up a parallel case with get, right? If a healthy person says, write a get for my wife, and he didn't say, and give it, right? Kitvu, right? But he doesn't say kitvu utnu, right? And give it. Therefore, we don't give it to the wife because maybe he's just trying to torment his wife. Not that that's a very nice thing, and not that we want to support that, but we don't think he meant, I'm going out of town now, do me a favor, deliver the get to my wife, right? We don't say that. And this case actually happened in the time of the Gemara, and the next day, the husband fell off the roof and died. So now the question is, what's going on, right? So the Gemara, I think, like very sharply says, right, if he fell on his own, i.e., if he jumps off the roof, so then you actually give the get to the wife, meaning he meant it as give it to the wife. If the wind pushes him off, meaning if he just like has an accident, so then you don't give it because he didn't mean to give it to his wife, right? And we say that the end proves what his original intent was, right? Again, right? If he jumps off the roof, it proves that he really did want to give the get to his wife. But we say maybe this case is different because he actually did say, write the get, as opposed to with shechita, he didn't necessarily say anything, and therefore it might not be parallel. Another case is if a person writes all of their property to a Kohen, and the Kohen says, I don't want, thank you so much for all of these things. I don't want the slaves. So we say that the slaves can still eat truma. It's as if the Kohen actually does own them, or no, he's allowed to say, I don't want the slaves, and the heirs actually inherit the slaves. Or maybe it's a machloket when he doesn't say anything at first. He doesn't say anything at first, and then says, I don't want them. But right, if someone else accepts it for him, maybe that is a different case, right? Again, does the action at the end, when he refuses them, show what he was thinking at the beginning, or no, not necessarily, right? And the law is that intent of the owner does not affect shechita. Only what the shochet is thinking about is taken into consideration. Okay. Ilanit asked, does this mean his suicide shows intent for the money to go to his wife by the get? That's what it sounds like. When he said write a get, I think also the issue is about less about the money and more about yibum, right? Does she need to do yibum with the brother? And we say, because he said write her a get, and then he is no longer the next day, we assume that he meant and give her the get. So I think that's the implication. Okay, next Mishnah. If a person shechts for an animal for the sake of mountains or hills or seas, rivers, deserts, that is invalid. Daf 40. If two people are holding the knife together and one has these improper thoughts and one has valid thoughts, the shechita is invalid, right? If half of it is done with improper thoughts. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, what does it mean that the shechita is invalid if you're thinking about the mountains and the stars and the sky and things like that? So the shechita is invalid, but the animal is still permitted for benefit. We don't say that this was an animal that was sacrificed for idolatry. Now, another Breita says that if you slaughter it for mountains, rivers, etc., it is seen as idolatry. So what's the difference? So the Gemara says that when the person is worshiping the spirit of the mountain or the spirit of the river, that is idolatry. And it's invalid, an invalid shechita. But our Mishnah is that you're actually worshiping the mountain itself. And we've learned this before. You cannot make mountains, things that are connected to the ground, into idols. That's not, it doesn't make the animal invalid. Okay, next case. Your friend's animal was crouching in front of an idol, and then you decide that you're going to shecht it for idolatry. Now, we say you cannot make another person's animal prohibited because of idolatry. You can mess up your own things, you can't mess up other people's things. But here, because you actually did an action, it does become prohibited. So too with the mountain, right? If you dig dirt out of the mountain, then that could be idolatry. Okay. If a person sacrifices a sin offering, a chatat, outside of the temple of the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat for idolatry, they're trying to cover all their bases and basically do the worst thing that they could do with this animal. I mean, maybe not the worst thing, but try to stack up as many sins as possible. They're actually liable for 3 sins, right? So again, outside Shabbat idolatry, but the Gemara says, but wait a minute, when you just cut one siman, again, one pipe, you're already making it invalid, and therefore how does this work? So we say, oh yeah, you're right. We're talking about a bird. Remember, a bird only needs one siman, and therefore all of these prohibitions come at the same time, right, simultaneously, and that's why you'd be liable for all three. Now the Gemara says, what type of action do you need? Does it need to be full, complete shechita, or maybe just a small cut? So we say that even a small cut would be an issue. Okay. We say, oh, well, but wait a minute, a chatat is, right, a sin offering isn't considered your own. Rather, the case is a bird that has half of its trachea already like cut or somehow separated, and then you make a small cut, but it actually finishes the shechita. Therefore, again, everything happens at the same time, and you would be liable. Again, as we said, you cannot prohibit your friend's things, only your own things. But with a chatat, because you get atonement from this sin offering, you might have thought that it's like yours. And we say, no, it's actually not like yours. The top of Daf 41, just to finish this off, right, that really could be a chatat behima, an animal sin offering, and can only happen when you shecht it completely for idolatry. Therefore, all the things happen at the same time. And finally, we say, no, it needs to be a bird sin offering because he gets atonement, and therefore he can affect it with even just the small act of shechita. Okay, with that, we finish for today. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to entertain those questions. Yes.
Yeah, sorry for the kind of divergence of the little topic there, but since you did answer it, my question about the get, etc., now I can't remember. So if he's giving her a get, jumps off the roof, he's committing suicide, but he thinks he's divorced her ahead of that point, was he being mean or good? Is he like trying to make sure that she is not qualified for Yibum because she's a divorced wife? Is that good or bad, and does she get the get? Does she get the money? And anyway, do you have any other clarification on that situation?
Yes. So first of all, is it good? Is it not good? Again, I think it really depends on the case. I think generally, at least when we were learning Gittin, a lot of these cases were about Yibum, meaning he was trying to be as caring and of his wife as possible, that he wanted to make sure she got her ketubah, and he wanted to make sure she would not be forced to marry his brother. So generally, that would be the case. Now, of course, we just created a case where he's actually tormenting his wife, but that would be when he doesn't kill himself, and he's saying, like, oh, you better be nice to me because I wrote this get already, and one wrong move and I'm going to divorce you, right? So we always have that tension. Definitely in the Gemara, the assumption is that a woman always wants to stay married. Therefore, the threat of divorce is a threat. It's scary. It's a torment. The flip side of the case is if he's actually going to die, giving the get, and if you remember when we did Gittin, we always talked about you can't give a get once you're dead. So that's saying it was retroactive. A lot of these like end of life gets are there to protect the woman and not to torment her. But
Thank you. That's so helpful. And
But
so
there's
go
also
ahead.
another scenario. Sorry, that she if she's divorced as opposed to being widowed, she's then asuad lekohen.
Right.
So that's another issue.
Right.
And
Right.
so like when David, I think was this initiated by David's army. David had all his soldiers write a get ahead of time. So if they didn't come back, it would not be a hardship on the yeah. Do you have
Exactly.
any idea if anyone still does that when they go off to war?
I think that there were a lot of cases on 9/11 that
Yeah. There's a whole book about that, actually.
yeah, that while the building was burning, the men who called their wives and said, "Listen, I'm going to jump now or whatever. Um, I don't know if they'll find my body. I don't know, what's going to be." And for her to prevent her from being an aguna, he was informing her that she's released, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there's actually a book. My husband is in that book actually about like halachic questions or things that came up after 9/11. It is not something that is standardized in the Jewish army, in the Israeli army nowadays, but I don't think it's something that is done. But you know, yeah.
Actually, I think actually in the army would be detrimental to her if she were divorced. In other words, if God forbid he gets killed in the army, she gets reparations. If she's divorced, she's not going to get anything.
Yeah,
Right. Interesting.
again, the in case he's never found,
Right.
that
Right.
kind of, or whatever, and they could
Right.
finally move to presume dead and give her some relief or whatever. It's all very, very interesting, but it's great that we keep fresh on all of this and the original intent to protect the woman so that we can bring it into modern times and make sure that we're still practicing that.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
It's
Yes.
always amazing all these halachas. How the Torah is constantly evolving to our times with our inventions and progress and all this stuff like this. There's a shir I started listening to from Web Yeshiva about it, fertility treatments. Is very, very interesting. It started this past Sunday,
Ah,
so
Well,
it's very interesting.
interesting.
Web
Interesting.
Yeshiva is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, just a public service announcement that in 1 year minus 2 days, we are finishing, and it's going to be the Siyum Hashas for women on the 7th of June, Be'ezrat Hashem. So put it on your calendars. June 7th, Be'ezrat Hashem in Jerusalem next year. Huge event. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I look forward to celebrating it with all of you. So put it on your calendar.
That would be a
Wow.
good day to make Aliyah, yes?
That would be, well, make Aliyah the day before so you can
Yes.
be at the event.
And get a little sleep.
Yes, exactly. So I will share details as they come up, but it is very exciting to see the. I wouldn't call it the end of the tunnel because there is no end between you and me, but the celebration that is Be'ezrat Hashem coming closer. So kol hakavod to everyone, and may we continue to study every day and every week. And see you Be'ezrat Hashem next week.
And it's
I'm
all it's all
I'm trying
because
to
of you,
catch up.
Rabbanit. It's all
I'm trying
because
to
of
catch
you.
up, and I'm in Masechet Brachot Nun Vav, so
Yes.
trying to
Okay.
catch
And
up.
So, no pressure, Rabbanit, but, we're counting on you to stay strong and to take us to the finish line.
I feel
Absolutely.
that pressure.
And beyond,
I feel
yeah.
it. I feel it.
No,
You should-
it's a
you can do
positive
it.
thing.
Hazak v'matz.
Thank you very much.
You should know that when WebYeshiva, I don't know if I should be recording this, but when WebYeshiva first asked me to give this class, I told them I would do it for 3 months. So that was 6.5 years ago. So, at this point,
Famous last words.
Be'ezrat Hashem, exactly. So it is a zchut for me to be able to be part of this journey with all of you. All right.
So much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tamara.
You will.
Bye.